to you this morning about a measurement tool we're currently developing at Toynbee Hall, financial wellbeing measurement tool to enable organizations to, mention back to what Elaine was talking about, measure the impact of interventions on an individual level. So just to get started, who's behind this project? The project is based at Toynbee Hall, where I work. We're a community-based organization in Whitechapel, been there since about 1884. We started off as a university settlement. Essentially, students studying welfare and poverty would come to the West End, East End of London to actually work with people in the community and learn what poverty looked like on the ground. So kind of our first services at Toynbee Hall were a free legal advice centre, which we still run today, and public lectures, and it's sort of grown from there. So today we have a number of services. Our remit is still to eradicate poverty in all of its forms, and we do that in a number of ways. We work with families in the community, young people, we have literacy projects, work with older people, and we have a debt advice project, and we also have a financial inclusion team, which is where I am based. So on this project, we're working in partnership with the National Centre for Social Research. They are the UK's leading social research agency, and we're working with their questionnaire testing hub. So essentially making sure the questions we'll be asking in this tool are relevant and valid and measuring what we're hoping we're measuring. We have a project steering group made up of about 26 individuals. We meet about quarterly, and their role is to make sure that we're sort of taking all of the different agencies, different organizations in the sector into account. As you all know, it's an extremely diverse sector. I think stemming from the fact that nobody is financially excluded in isolation. It's a product of other issues, and there's a lot of different needs to take into account. So a lot of different agencies on that steering group. We've got Citizens Advice, got the Money Advice Service, a number of university departments, Resolution Foundation, Money Advice Trust, a large range. And then probably a number of you are probably more familiar with Transact than Toynbee Hall. Transact is the National Forum for Financial Inclusion. I sit about 3 feet away from them. And we're working with them on this project to spread the message of what we're doing and to get input from the sector. That's backwards. So kind of going back to the tool, we first started to recognize the need for robust measurement tools in our work about 5 years ago. A number of reasons for this. One, to kind of help us identify what was working, what's not working, so we can better target our resources. And also, as Elaine mentioned, for funders, it's quite difficult to demonstrate the impact of your work to funders in funder reports in a meaningful way. So at the time, I was working at Toynbee Hall for full-time while doing my master's in social research methodology, and I decided to focus my dissertation on that, working with clients at Toynbee Hall. From that, I kind of left. It was a resulting financial inclusion index. I left that with Toynbee Hall, and we sort of approached City Foundation, who's our funder, and secured funding for a feasibility study in 2009. So we ran a feasibility study last year for 6 months, from July to December. The focus of that feasibility study was really on financial inclusion measurement. As I said, we're looking at financial well-being. We'll kind of go back to that later. Financial inclusion measurement, really looking at whether or not it was feasible to develop a tool that will allow service providers to measure the service user's journey from financial exclusion to inclusion, and in so doing demonstrate the impact of their service. For the purposes of the feasibility study, we came up with a definition of financial inclusion. As we know, there's not one kind of industry standard definition of financial inclusion, but for these purposes, we decided to define it as a complex multidimensional process that involves the lack or denial of financial resources, goods and services, as well as the inability to participate in the mainstream financial services market that is available to the majority of people in society. Financial exclusion affects both the quality of life of individuals and the equity and cohesion of society as a whole. So it's very much sort of the definition we used during the feasibility study. It was largely a lot of desk-based research, but we also consulted stakeholders through a series of regional roundtables, and the result was overwhelmingly very positive. A couple of quotes here, just sort of highlighting why people think there would be benefit in this. People highlight a number of different things, saying they were struggling to measure the impact within their organizations. They were finding it hard to communicate effectively with funders on what they were doing. And actually those that were effectively measuring impact within their own organizations felt that they were doing it very much in isolation. They weren't able to learn from other organizations because they weren't comparing like for like. So these are all things we sort of took away with us. The key finding from the feasibility study, as I say, ran for 6 months, was that it's not only feasible to develop a financial inclusion or financial well-being measurement tool, but it's something that the sector clearly wants. As I just said, stakeholders are aware they need to measure outcomes, but I never felt that they didn't have the necessary knowledge or skills. And those that did have those knowledge or skills felt that they could benefit from broader learning from other organizations. We came up with sort of a way to conceptualize measurement of financial inclusion. Again, not in any way wedded to this model. It was just something that came out of 6 months of desk-based research, some talking to stakeholders, and thought of a way we could kind of conceptualize this into a measurement index. It's called FI3D, to say that it was financial inclusion measured across 3 dimensions. Dimension 1, financial participation, very much the traditional access to financial products that I'm sure a number of you are familiar with if you worked in the sector for a number of years. Access to bank accounts, affordable credit, savings, and home contents insurance, as well as face-to-face advice. The second dimension on financial capability, a number of you will probably recognize these indicators from the FSA's baseline survey from 2005. Just sort of broadly looking at keeping track of finances, making ends meet, planning ahead, choosing financial products, and staying informed about financial matters. And then the third dimension is much more about broader issues of financial well-being, so quality of financial life, whether or not somebody's experiencing material hardship, whether they're over-indebted, if their income is secure, and if they're in a sustainable living situation. So some of the challenges that came out or were identified through the feasibility study here. First one is that there's a number of different definitions in use. You know, as I just said, there's no established definition of financial inclusion. Some organizations focus on capability, some look at inclusion, some look at literacy, and they all mean slightly different things. Obviously all part of the same area, but slightly different things, which can make it quite difficult to pin down definitions, pin down what we're talking about. Second challenge is that the sector is extremely varied and diverse. As I said, financial exclusion is the product of other issues going on in somebody's life. It's not that somebody's just financially excluded. When you're looking at different groups such as homeless, ex-offenders, single parents, it's very difficult to find a way to measure all of that all together. The third, that there's a lot of soft outcomes associated with the sector which can be difficult to measure. We all know it's not enough to open up a bank account for someone. It's what are they doing with this account? Do they have the confidence to manage the account? Are they constantly looking for other opportunities with their account? Are they going to upgrade from a basic to a current? And those are sometimes a bit more difficult to measure than the standard tick box, what products they're currently holding. So from the feasibility study, we were able to secure a further 2 years of funding from the City Foundation. So this is a 2-year program of work. Just started in June, so very much in the beginning phases. As I say, funded by the City Foundation, the philanthropic arm of Citibank. As a funder, they have a kind of much larger presence internationally, but they're very excited to be working on this project in the UK. And for this, we're focusing on the broader area of financial well-being. So obviously this encompasses financial inclusion and capability, but it's also looking at other areas as well, literacy, income maximization, for example. So our vision for the tool eventually is one that is multidimensional, intuitive to use, no confusion what these questions are getting at, holistic, as I say, looking at broader well-being. We're thinking about a questionnaire design, just because people in the sector generally quite used to doing questionnaires, needs assessments, and following on from that, we'd like it to be web-based, so that you are able to get instant results and so that data is stored in one central location. So where we are now, as I say, started in June. We're in the beginning part of the phase. We're looking at the development of the tool at this point. Following on from this sort of development phase, we will be developing the first phase of the tool. Our aim is to have a first phase of the tool by Christmas, at which point we will be piloting the tool over, in total, about 10 months' time. I'll give you a bit more information on the pilots afterwards. After that point, we'll be finalizing the tool and rolling it out across the sector, which, as you can imagine, will involve a lot of training of organizations on how to use the tool.